Good morning. First thing you get to see is the back of me. Welcome to today's live stream. For the first time, I don't have a primed question because I want to be available for you to ask the questions that are on your mind. So we're going to have open discussion today. And I'll try to keep the two chat feeds going. But this is an Ask the Questions You Have day, which means it could be a little quiet for a while. I think it's important to have the give and take. I know when I was earning my master music education degree, it was in an online program from Boston University. I lived in Colorado, and there were several modules or classes that I took throughout the time that were just fine with doing the online thing, where content was provided ahead of time and we interacted with it, and we were assessed on our comprehension, and we could ask questions that could be answered in a delayed fashion. But I know that when it came time to music theory, for example, when I would ask my question, there was it wasn't a proctor, it was somebody that actually lived in my time zone who was working with Boston to provide responses. But I realized that what I really needed or would have best benefited from was someone standing next to me with a chalkboard. Because as I would come up with an idea or try to put things together, I'd have a question and I'd write the question, and 2 days later I'd get a response. And by the time I got the response, I couldn't remember what the question was. So I know that the in-person connections, the live one-to-one, is a very important component of learning, not for everything, but for many things. Sometimes people want to have just the confirmation that they're on the right page before they go too much further. So I guess I'm going to say the importance of live one-to-one feedback. And I know that I have some students who have decided in this quarantine time not to continue with lessons because they really wanted it to be in person, and we can't do that. So they're just waiting. Some others transitioned immediately to online lessons because they knew that they knew the value for themselves of having a deadline. I have to have this in order to work on this. If I don't have the deadline, if I'm going to see Steve, Doug, you're saying you're one of the people who likes live feedback one-to-one. I understand that. What's actually happened here in the Bay Area, Doug's in the Bay Area, and travel time is a huge part of any kind of lessons. Arranging and figuring out when can we travel when we're not having to cross a bridge with rush hour traffic and all those kind of things. And one of the things that online has done is taken away the travel commute. However, if we're working from home and we're learning from home, it's just a lot of being on the camera. And I know that there is some of that fatigue that happens. So having the question and a quick answer, or a quick promise to get the answer, because sometimes I don't know the answer. So, but a lot of the purpose of studying something is so that you have a lot of those questions raised so that later on when someone asks them, yeah, I remember that. I remember asking that question. So here, Jim has a question here in the Facebook feed. Often confused by intervals counting up and down. And this is a good one, yes. If we're talking about D going up to A, and that's the example used, if D is 1, D, E, F sharp, G, A, that's a fifth. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now to go from this A up to the octave, 5, 6, 7, 8, there's only 4 steps that way. So from the D below to the A, which is the fifth, and from the A, which is the fifth, up to the octave is a fourth. And this is just, it's not decimal. It doesn't come out even in like 1 to 5. It's more like inches, where instead of 10, you have 12, and you've got to live in that world. But the way that we have it's based on the harmonic system and how we've divided it up. And that's the key construct here is if a note vibrates at a certain pitch, which is measurable, and it goes twice as fast, that's an octave. But if it goes twice as fast again, then we're getting into the overtone system, which helps us reveal some other things. And the space between 0 and 5 is called a perfect fifth, because if I take a string and divide it in half, that's where the octave or the node's going to be for getting a harmonic. Let me demonstrate this here. So here's the vibrating length of the string from 0 to the nut, or from the nut to the bridge. If I measure this at the 7th fret, that's where it's halfway, so that's an octave. This pitch is when I divide that one in thirds, I get where the fifth is. This is weird. If I divide it in half from here to here and here to here, I get an octave higher than this one. So I take the string, divide it in half, I get the harmonic, which is an octave higher than the fundamental, which is the pitch I'm playing. Now, divide that into thirds, which would be like this. So at the 7th fret, it's an octave. At the 4th fret, I get the A pitch. If I play it, I also get an A going from here to here, which is higher. Actually, it's like going from 0 to 4 on the melody string. And you can see that's a much shorter distance. So going from A to D is a fourth. I'm on 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. And in the key of A, going from A to D is the 4th step of that scale. Guten Tag. Yeah, let's see. I'm not quite sure where you must be if you're in the German North Sea coast, Andreas. Must be afternoon there, right? Because it's 8 here. So guten Abend. It's good to have you here. We're doing questions, and right now the question is about intervals. So counting up from D, that is the 5th step of the D scale. But D is the 4th step of the A scale. E is the 5th step of the A scale, and E up to A, E, F sharp, G sharp, A is 4 steps away from A, because A is the 4th step of the E scale. So you start to see how the circle of fifths works going one way and the circle of fourths works going the other way. And I don't know if that answers the question, but the direction is what determines which interval I'm talking about. From an A up to a D is a fourth, even if I'm playing in the key of D. So on a hammered dulcimer, and this is where the visual, I think, is most confusing. Let's see. If I'm playing D to A across the bridge, that's a fifth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if I'm thinking I'm in the key of D, I want to play a fifth, that's easy. But if I play down here, it's only 4 away. It's a fourth interval. But my orientation, because I'm in the key of D, is that we're at D. So I'm playing the fifth of that scale, even though the actual interval between D to A going below is a fourth. Almost. It's almost good Nacht. Aha. And that's going to be, so on the hammer dulcimer, the mark to mark fifths is how we think about it, because we're going from the low to the high. But if I start in this way and I can alternate, there's a sixth, there's a fifth, there's a fourth, in terms of orienting from here. Third, sixth, fifth, fourth, third, second. So I think I don't know if that clears up the question for you, Jim, but that's what's going on. It's where am I oriented from? Imperfect fourth. Of course. Actually, the perfect fourth and perfect fifth are the descriptions of those intervals. If you augment, you're raising the 5 by a half step. If you diminish, you're lowering the 5 by a half step. So those two words deal with altering the fifth. The fourth, am I saying that right? I don't think I am saying that right. Let's see if I am. That's diminish. Yeah, if I can also raise the 4 and keep the major third, and that's when it's let's see now. No, that's a major third flat 5. And now I need to, that's the augmented. Good morning, Talon. Hummels. The first thing to think about is intervals instead of pitches, because in the States, it wasn't until the late 80s that everybody settled on D as a pitch to tune their strings to. But my understanding of Hummels is that they were very much like the 155, 158 that we're familiar with, starting with whatever pitch you want to use. I've never played a Hummel. I've seen Scheitholz, which in the Berlin Musical Instruments Museum, They unfortunately kept them in the basement by the bathroom. But they had a wonderful collection of Scheitholz and Helmzitters. Zitter is the German spelling of English Zither, Zitter. Z-I-T-T-R-E. Yeah, to remember the German names for the alphabet. That goes back into my history a little bit. So drones are going to be typically whatever lets you, what style of music are you going to play? The whole point of the drones is think bagpipey a little bit. Bagpipes is typically a 1 and octaves. If you're playing a fireside set of pipes, the 5 is going to be the one in the, you're going to have 1 5 5, which is a DA, like a DAA. If you're going to be playing the Highland pipes, it's going to be the chanter at 1, and everything else at the octave below. The pipes are longer. I know, and so that's why we often talk about the tuning of the dulcimer and bagpipe tuning. Everything is at the same pitch, even though we're doing like A or D or something like that. The difference is the bagpipes have a step below do, and they have a Mixolydian scale going the other way. So it's 9 notes. It's so if we think A, we've got G, A, B, C, G, A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G natural, A. That would be our 9 notes. And it's not laid out like we're laid out, because when we're tuned to DAD. We don't have the notes below do. To go ba da da. Almost there. So when I'm doing that, oh, you can't see much of that. Sorry about that. Playing the notes below do, I'm tuned to EAA so that I can play from 4 to 11, which is typically the Dorian scale, unless I use 6.5 instead, and now it's the Mixolydian scale. And that lets me get the note below do. And that ornament on pipes is a burl. I don't know if you want to know all that, but there you have it. So Hummels are not going to be necessarily bagpipe oriented, but it's typically the 1 and the 5 because of that 5th interval that we were talking about earlier. It's very stable. The whole point of retuning a mountain dulcimer is to get the drones to line up with it. And if, I get to show you something. It's not in playable condition yet. This historic instrument has come to me from Harry Tuft, who used to own and run the Denver Folklore Center before he sold it and retired. This is and this had come to him. It's a Siegrist dulcimer. And still working on history and connections. I've got to take some pictures and send this to Ralph Lee Smith. But I don't know if you'll notice that the fretboard pattern is a bit different. It's got tuning pins like a hammer dulcimer, so it needs a wrench or a key in order to tune things. But you'll notice there are fence staples that go, or frets. I haven't determined. Yeah, they look like they are fence staples, actually. Wire that's been bent and filed down to be flat. These lower ones got a good bit of play because they're flattened out and show some wear. But they only go under what would be the melody string or strings. And I've got, let's see. I'm missing, there are 2 empty tuning pegs here. Are there? Oh, there's 1 peg missing. And there's an empty one over here. So there are 2 slots that are available to have strings. But there is a fret at what would be 1 on a mountain dulcimer, and this would be 3 and 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So one of the things that this one does, it might be that it was created as a replica. The back and sides are solid wood. There are little feet to let it sit on a table or a surface like that. And there are 2 places here where there are notches. And I'm guessing that, and there was one there, that this sat on a possum board or some kind of a stand, and those little notches held it in place. There's one up here, one down here, one over here. And there's a wrist rest that has been screwed on with flathead screws that covers the strings on the tail. There are what would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drone strings. And there's the only place you can change these, and they're put so close together, it's really hard to imagine fingering just one of these. And right now they're tuned to different pitches, which sounds more chordal. It's like an open chord. But there are frets that go all the way across at the 1, the 3, and the 4 positions. There are longer frets that would go underneath, be certain to go under the doubled melody strings, and one of the melody strings is broken. And then there are additional half frets put in that only go under the melody string. So that's an example of when the previous ones would not even have the ones that go all the way across until after World War II. So I would tune my drones so that I could play whatever I wanted to play on the melody string or strings. And I'm retuning my melody strings to match the drones, or I have to retune the drones to match the melody string so I can get the support I want for the different kind of songs I want to play. Now this one, because it has the chromatic thing, looks like it's more of an experimental kind of thing. Someone trying some things out. Jim, you're saying you haven't played your tiny, but not tinny soprano since February. Yeah, instruments want to be played. And so I do call it dulcimer abuse, instrument abuse. And unfortunately, my bagpipes have been severely abused for too long. Okay, so let me give an example, Talon. And Jim, I think depending on your sense of guilt, there may be an infinite number. So the drones are typically 1/5 something on a mountain dulcimer. So when I tune, I've tuned my melody string down, so now it's a 1/5 flat 7. My scale starts at 1, and then my drones match. I've tuned it to DAC, and when that means that DAC, if I just play, let's see, sounds kind of cool. It doesn't sound like the Soldier Joy I'm ready for. Now the drones line up, but I've got a minor melody because I moved everything up 1. Because in order to get DAD now, because this is C, I have to play a whole step away from that. That gives me the D. Now, what I find is very interesting when I'm doing a workshop with people and ask them to retune to DAC, I'll say, put your first finger at the first fret and strum that. What does it sound like? They'll say, oh, it sounds minor. And I think that's very interesting because the pitches DAD, when I'm putting my first finger at the first fret, are the same as when we tune it DAD. There's no major or minor about it. But they heard the flat 7 as they tuned, and that flat 7 is always a part of the minor scale. So I think it sets us up to think, oh, that does sound minor. Tay-do instead of T-do. Tay-do, T-do, tay-do. So if I would want to retune this to now I'm tuned to DAA, which is 155. My scale starts at 3. And I don't use 6.5. I don't need it. gives me the notes below do, which is the way the dulcimer was actually originally designed. The drones didn't change. What I did was reorient my melody string so I could play my melody starting in a different location. Now, if I turn them down another step, when I tuned it now to 1-5-4 or D-A-G, matching the D string at the 3rd fret, and I start playing at 4, I've got the Dorian mode. Lord, I got mercy on him, Lord, I got mercy on him, Lord, I got mercy on him, early in the morning. So I'm playing 1-5-4, and I'm going to the 4th fret in order to get the D that I was looking for before. So this is still orienting toward Dorian of D. Is this making sense, Talon? And then I've got D. Now, I wouldn't have to retune anything. I can go back to D. Interesting. Now I can play the Dorian mode all day long without playing drones, and it's going to sound fine. I don't have to retune anything because the way the frets are laid out and where I start is what's going to make the difference. Now, if I drone that, though, it doesn't have the same power it did because I've got a D droning on the bottom. It doesn't sound completely bad because this is an A. But that's where I raise my lowest string to an E, then I have A's and E's, and I'm orienting everything to A. Now you're questioning, are they able to play with others in DAD? Not the same music. If people have no extra frets on their instruments, and like the Seacrest that has all those extra half frets all the way around, when people are tuned to DAD, they have usually the choice of the 6, 6.5, and D. Now, it would be possible for me to play well, let me revise my answer. They could do something. They wouldn't be playing melody together. So while you're tuned to DAC and playing, or DAG and playing Dorian of what do we do? What do we do with a drunken sailor? What do we do with a drunken sailor? What do we do with a drunken sailor? Lying aboard. Fall on your knees for the sea is raging. Fall on your knees for the sea is raging. Fall on your knees. So what I'm doing is not playing D major, because that doesn't go with that song. It's a minor mode tune, and it's composed of two chords, the D and the C natural. So it is possible in DAD tuning to play chords that are going to go along with someone who's playing the melody in DAG. I don't know if that's exactly the question you were asking, Talon, but that's the way I would answer it. Well, actually, Jim, that's an interesting connection. The Dorian mode is often called mountain minor, and it ended up in the mountains because a lot of Celtic music uses the Dorian mode. So the sea shanty, what do we do with the drunken sailor, is related to Captain Kidd, which is an older sea shanty. But those came from the British Isles, and the people who settled in the Appalachians, a lot of the Appalachians, were people who came from those places. Now, they were also Germans, and just fascinating cross-pollination of all the different cultures and people who came here from where they came, and how the musics overlapped with each other. But Dorian is not an uncommon one in mountain music, actually. In Ruth Crawford Seeger's American Folk Songs for Children and Early American Christmas Tunes, which are the old Christmas before the Santa Claus stuff that really took hold after Clement's poem in the late 1880s, Christmas was not celebrated on the 25th. It was celebrated on the 6th of January. And Old Christmas was a much more austere tradition. And it related to the Yule log burning and there's all those, the things that are woven together. But out of the songs that she took from the collections that have been made all over the country, the Lomaxes did a lot of that collecting. There were a lot of minor mode tunes. So Mary Had a Baby, Sweet Lamb is one that got collected in Texas. Mary had a baby, sweet lamb. 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 And it's a call and response, and the response for everybody is Sweet Lamb. It's definitely a minor mode tune. It's in, I put it in the DAC tuning. Mary had a baby, sweet lamb. 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 It's a pentatonic tune. It's leaving out the second step of the scale. It's leaving out the sixth. So 5, 4, 3, 1, 7, 7, 8, flat 7, 8, flat 7, 8, 5, 4, 3, 1, flat 4, 4, 5, 1, 0, flat 7, 1, 3, 1, flat 7, flat 3, 1, flat 7, 8, Mary. Oh, there it is. It shows up. It's a hexatonic tune. The second step does show up at the very end. Mary and the baby, sweet lamb. But that's one of those minor mode tunes. It doesn't include the Dorian note, however. So I guess it doesn't prove my point, but I like it. Well, friends, thank you for bringing your questions today. I don't know if I completely answered your question, Talon, but just going forth, I just want to let you know that I will continue the live streams, but it will be at a shorter period length. I'm wearing my Music Together shirt today because starting next week, I'll have a 9 o'clock my time live Zoom class for my Music Together families. And I won't be able to do these live questions all the way up until 9. I have to be able to let loose. So I'm gonna make this a half hour kind of a thing from here on in while I have classes in session. All right. But today I don't have that. Today I'm wearing the shirt because I have to I have to record the class. That's a piece of, it's a whole, like everybody in education in any way is doing things differently. So I get to change what I'm doing. All summer, in the rest of spring after the quarantine and summer, we recorded all of our classes. Now we're going to have a combination of recorded and live Zoom classes. So learning new rhythms. Talon, you're asking on different tricks you can be added when playing. When do you know when to add? Well, one thing is listen to how other people play and see what they do, and listen to what you think sounds right and duplicate it. That's one avenue. If you're listening, like Celtic music, for example, you can't read that out of a book and get the feel. You need to listen to the way people who are steeped in the tradition play. That can be written down, but unless you have the feel for it, you're probably not going to duplicate it. Though all the written stuff are great clues, but try to immerse yourself in the tradition you want to play in. If you're not doing that, if you're not following a tradition like that, you're looking to add some things, then experiment. Can you do it? Number one, there are some places that's like, that's a ridiculous place to put an ornament. I can never do it. So I'm going to put it someplace where it's more easily done. Then the other one is, okay, I can put it there, but I don't like it. So if I don't like it, why would I leave it there? So experimentation is really important as you're thinking of the doodly doos and the hammer-ons, pull-off slides, articulations, ornaments. Is it a fast or slow piece? What's the purpose of it? Is, like in a contest, you're going to want to put some of that stuff in because it's a personal flavor, but you want to do it accurately and you want to do it with taste. You just don't want to do it like I listened to a friend of mine who had judged a contest, and he says, "Oh, it just ticks me off when people just put crap in there. They're not even caring what the tune is. They're just putting crap in there to show you they can play crap." So it didn't impress him as a judge. He wasn't judging the particular contest we were talking about. He was just watching it, but thinking of it from a judge's perspective, thinking, that maybe you can do it, but should you? And that ends up being a very personal judgment call. But I think the first thing is experimentation. Listen to see where it can happen, then try some things, and then after you've tried them and you might like them, record yourself playing them with those ornaments and doodads in the places that you're thinking about it, and listen to the recording without you playing it and see if it strikes you in the same way as it does when you're doing it. Because sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes while you're doing it, it's like, this is the coolest thing. You listen to it, it's like, well, that was distracting. Or other times, you'll be questioning whether or not this is a valuable thing, and you listen to the recording and go, wow, that was really nice. So listening to a recording of yourself playing when you're not playing is some important data. It's actually a good tool that I always suggest for people who are wanting to advance in both their playing and their understanding. Any other questions today? We have time for them. And Doug, I did notice earlier you said you transitioned to Zoom pretty well. I think that's right. You've had to do it for work, but you're doing a lot of musical things that way too. And I think one of the things that's been most interesting to me about this whole pandemic and quarantine experience is that a lot of us old dogs have learned new tricks. And that's not a bad thing. Okay, on that one, if I made my melody D, I would tune the other drones most likely to D's and A's. Or I might tune them all to A's. I don't know. I'm still, debating, you know, I don't know that it has great value as a historic instrument other than as an example of something, which is why I'm going to photograph it and measure it and all that stuff and send that information to Ralph Lee Smith, who writes that column, Tales and Traditions in Dulcimer Players News. I know that I did a search and he had mentioned the Siegcrest name once in an earlier article, but it was about a hammer dulcimer. So I'd like to know more about that. But it could be made playable by cleaning it up and putting on new strings and replacing the missing tuning pin. Hi, Deanna. Jim, the question about the room is resonant. Yeah, all dogs need new tricks. That's right. And treats, new treats too. um, the space in which you play does make a difference. It's like if you play in a room that's full of carpet, you play in a room that doesn't have, has either a really or a thick pile carpet and curtains on the windows, it's going to have one kind of sound. If you play in a room that has wooden floors and there's not much on the walls and there's no curtains on the windows, that's going to be very resonant. It's going to produce, ambient experiences of the sound. The hammer dulcimer has a lot of sustain already, but that sustain is then it's being doctored by the room. And if you play like the difference between singing in a bedroom where you may have carpet on the floor and curtains on the windows and bedclothes on the bed, there's a lot to absorb the sound. You go right from there into the bathroom, like in the shower where you have tile all around you and maybe a tub. That's going to make a very, very reverberant kind of sound. And that's going to be different. Now, how much your room's sound adds to the reverb over a Zoom experience is an entirely different question. Because you probably have the best musical settings in Zoom for that experience, it might be that what they're used to hearing on Zoom is echo cancellation and background noise and all that kind of stuff taken away. And because you've turned those things off to have the best musical experience, it might have more impact. But that's why there are rooms with natural reverb, and those can be great recording spaces, but you can also record in a very dry space where all of the reverberation that could be present in the room has been attempted to be canceled, usually by baffles, foam and things like that are put around all over the place, so that the signal they get is a very dry signal to which they can add reverb in the mix if they want to. So how much does a room add to sustain? If the room has a lot of reverb in it, naturally, that's going to have some effect. But, measuring that's another question. And I know you're into measuring stuff. So everybody who's just joined, this is an open question session today. for anybody who's interested or has some burning questions or some smoldering questions or some ice cold questions that you forgot you had. Still, one of the reasons I asked or I was talking about the live in one-to-one feedback is because as we're going through some study about Dulcimer Crossing to make some improvements for moving to a new platform. There's a lot of behind the scenes construction going on. And one of the things that I know that a lot of people do ask for is that one-to-one thing. And so we're in the process of figuring out how that could happen. These live things are one way. It's not the same as a lesson. It's, one to many kind of thing. This is more like webinar. But if you have ideas, if you have further questions or topics that you think we can address in these live Q&As going forward, please write to me. With your ideas or questions. Well, of course, I'm going to have to look up what anechoic is. Okay. Material to deaden an echo chamber. Yeah, I'm getting some pictures. So like a sensory deprivation room. There's some interesting pictures when you look at that. And I think, obviously if you're outside on open grass, you're probably going to hear crickets and cicadas and things like that, or the bats. I don't know if you're going to hear bats. I'm not going to hear bats, not doing their echolocation, but because the sound goes out and doesn't come back, I think you're right. Oh, here's a question. How do we get a Zoom practice with others not to sound like our dulcimers are in a tin can? First off, download the newest version or update your Zoom to the newest version, which is now 5.2.3. And that's a great suggestion. Let me share my screen. Let me make sure Zoom is open. It does really frustrate me when I click the little thing that says keep me signed in to Zoom. I'm not. Anyway. So I want to share my screen, application window, Zoom. Okay. So if I go to preferences. Oh, first I just check about Zoom to see what version I'm at. There it is, 5.22. Okay, I have to upgrade this one to get to 5.2.3 because that just happened yesterday. But in my audio settings, I make sure that I turn off automatically adjust microphone volume. I make sure that suppressed background noise is low because what gets interpreted as background noise for Zoom is music. And then in the advanced sections, I can't, to turn off echo cancellation, I can't turn it off, but I can put it on automatic instead of aggressive, because if there's any echo, it wants to pretend we're in speech. Then I do this, show in meeting option to enable original sound from the microphone. If I don't use enable original sound, it's definitely going through the Zoom processor, which is processed for speech. Then I disable the echo cancellation. I guess that's the way I deal with it here. I choose high fidelity music mode and I choose use stereo audio. And that gives me the best possible settings for Zoom. And that will go a long way. Now, the other thing that's going to have a huge impact is using an external mic. This may not be an option for you because this is a good studio microphone, also a good live microphone. It's an Audio-Technica 4050. It's a large diaphragm mic and in the shock absorber because it's very sensitive, but it's great for a wide range of things. I have played with this kind of microphone with a trio where this is the only sound and we're just grouped around the microphone and it picks us up really well. This is also going through, for me, an audio interface. This one is called, oops, we don't want that. This is an Apogee Quartet. So I have 4 different inputs that are XLR microphone, or they could be instruments with a 1/4-inch jack, but they have great preamps. So the microphone is going to sound the best it can because of the preamp. So those 2 things make a huge difference. If you're using the microphone that is built into your computer, it's great for speech. But every time I try to use that microphone, even for recording something, wow, 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 I get a lot of that kind of sound, even if I'm not on Zoom. So the equipment you're using to capture it is important. That'll make a big difference. And then having the Zoom settings to be the highest fidelity you can is going to make the other difference. And then giving yourself some forgiveness because it's still going to be Zoom. It's not going to be the same as being in the same room. And you can't play together with the microphones both on, because the competition between the microphone of you and the other person is going to keep trying to cancel each other out. It's actually quite amazing when you think about the transmissions between NASA, control and astronauts in space. Is when one is talking, the other, when you're talking, it turns everything off. You can't hear anything else. And when you take off your talk button, that's when you can hear what's going on. We don't have to do that in order to speak. We don't have to have a button that says, let me talk now. The software is set up so it listens for who's talking and tries to make them in the front. But if that's multiple people, that's when they cancel each other out. So, well, it is the top of the hour. I want to thank you for your attention and your input. And if you, like I said before, if you have ideas of what you're wanting, topics you'd like to cover, can be general music, can be mountain, can be hammer dulcimer, practices of being a musician, any of those things. Let me know. I'll look forward to seeing you next week.